Welcome to the Friends of the Earth Malta podcast, where we discuss sustainability topics of importance to the Maltese Islands and beyond. Friends of the Earth Malta began in 1985 and is part of an international network of organizations, all working to reduce pollution, protect nature, reduce waste, promote local agriculture, and address climate change around the world. We bring you expert guests to help you make sense of what's happening and what you can do. Welcome again to this episode of the Friends of the Earth Malta podcast. In our last podcast, we talked about food waste as an issue and what's happening in Malta to try to address it, including the Friends of the Earth Malta's EU-funded project, Food Connect, which will expand a food sharing app that currently exists in Cyprus to also be used in Malta and Portugal. Today, we'll be speaking even more on this topic with Keith Abela. Keith is a trained chef, lecturer, food science writer, and gastronomy consultant who spends all his free time trying to understand the complexities and language of our food systems. So welcome, Keith.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So tell us a little bit about what you do to assist restaurants and other food establishments.
Well, quite a few things. It all depends because as you said, it's not only restaurants, it's like factories as well, and I've had some supermarkets as well. So there's quite a few things actually, but it all depends on the needs of the client, so to speak. So most of the time, it's identifying like the majority of waste that they have, where it's coming from, and try to find creative solutions to try use them, depending, because it has to be functional as well. It can't just be, oh, we're reducing food waste, but we're making this cool thing, but we're not going to use that cool thing. That doesn't really make sense. So it has to be functional. But one of the things that I like to do as well is focus a little bit on low energy solutions to actually solve the problem. One of the most common things that I've been showing people, for example, over the last, to be honest, 6 years now, is how to make preserves out of leftover citrus peel. So, for example, restaurants, cafe, it could be the smallest cafeteria. If you're having fresh orange juice, there's going to be a 50% wastage of the orange sort of skin and pit. And most of the time show them how to preserve that, where it can last, like if done right, it can last on their shelves for around 2 years. They've created a value-added product, and there's genuinely zero waste. You only throw away the seed of the oranges, which is great. But there's a few other things I do. I've had clients, for example, that have had problems with their products. They wanted to extend their shelf life. So I've done things for that. Extending shelf life, obviously, it's a great way of reducing waste as well. And how to extend shelf life of fragile produce like berries and fresh fruit and things like that. So how to prevent them, even though they're perishable items, but rather than they go bad in, let's say, a week, I could naturally extend their shelf life by 2 weeks without having to put any energy into changing the product. So quite a few things there.
Wow. Have you witnessed a lot of food waste in the work that you do? I know other friends of mine have worked in restaurants, and they comment to me that there's just enormous amounts of waste, and they're kind of shocked and kind of don't really even know what to do about it. They work there and they say, oh, I wish I could do something, but
No, definitely loads. It's quite scary actually, like the amount. However, I would say that restaurants over the last few years have gotten a lot better at reducing the amount of waste that's thrown out. Unfortunately, I think there's still a massive problems in hotels and supermarkets, especially. I would say that within the whole sort of system, those are the worst, definitely the worst like contenders that there are. We also have lots of other lots of other problems really in, let's say, there's a lot of problems in the farms. But there's a lot of problems in farms as well. But weirdly enough, I would have to say, like from the experience I've had, I would say homes are sadly the worst culprit. Like, unfortunately, we do have a tendency to throw a lot and a lot and a lot of food away um, at at home.
Yes, and it's something that we'll talk about before the end of this interview, as well as what people can do. Um, where does most of the food get wasted along the food chain, do you think? Like from the producer to the restaurant to the plate?
Sadly, to be honest, I had a project around, well, it started 6 years ago actually, and I stopped it around 3 years ago, where we were helping farmers, educating farmers of how to preserve that. And having looked at several different contenders within the food system, locally at least, I would have to say that a lot of it gets thrown away on the farm. Not that the farmers are doing anything wrong. I want to make that as clear as possible. Sadly, I think this comes down to the consumer. So much gets thrown away at the farm, just let's say with global warming and climate change being such massive issues at the moment, and Malta being sort of a very, very hot nation, you do tend to see, especially in summer, when hot and windy, because that's really important as well. You do get to see, for example, in summer, a lot of vegetables getting bruised, getting peppers, for example, are very susceptible to sunburn, which can cause like there's nothing wrong with the pepper, nothing at all. They'll be a little bit dry in one little corner, or they'll have
Oh,
a blemish. But unfortunately, that product has to be thrown away. In organic farming, or like far, how can I call this? Low intervention farming, where farmers don't use a lot of pesticides or use nothing at all. You see like a little snail bite on a product, a little something natural that's wrong with the product, but they're not. It's not that they're not allowed to sell it, but if they try to sell it, it's just not going to sell. Unfortunately, then supermarkets don't buy them, restaurants rarely do, although there are some that will. So unfortunately, they're stuck with a lot of these. Sometimes if the farmers are allowed to keep animals, that's great, because that ends up being animal feed, especially if they're cheesemakers and they also have a farm. That's great because a lot of that waste ends up being fed to goats or sheep or cattle. Although they can be very fussy as animals, so they might not eat everything. Um, but there are, unfortunately to say, as much as the farmers hate it as well, there are these components. Wind as well affects the product. You'll end up with fruit, especially now in summer. You'll end up with fruit with what we say like a callus, or little scrapes, where as it's growing, it will just scrape on the tree a little bit, and the fruit will have a rough exterior, but it's still perfectly fine to eat. And all these little things, really. I mean, there are natural elements like a lot of rain, like a lot of people that eat local, any locavore out there will sort of know that strawberries this year have been like price wise through the roof. That's because of all the little bouts of rain we've been having every week, which is a little bit unseasonal for. It's good that it's still there, but it's causing a lot of disease like rust and onions, which should be harvested soon, and strawberries should be at their peak of season. So the rain is causing a lot of mold growth. So it's these weather dependent things that unfortunately cause the farmers to actually throw away products.
wow.
Supermarkets as well, I have to say, I was quite amazed, simply because, again, it's not the supermarket's fault. I don't think when it comes to businesses, I don't think no any business wants to throw their money away, literally. But consumer perception is a certain way, and unfortunately, there are some things which can become a little bit silly. There are some laws as well which are silly as well and cause us to throw food away unnecessarily.
Yes, that's one of my questions. Like, what are some of the common examples of needlessly wasted products? You were explaining a little bit, but
For example, mushrooms. Mushrooms are one of the more ridiculous ones. So just, and this is what I mean by silly laws. Uh, Again, I know that there are a lot of laws there to protect us, and rightfully so. Food can be dangerous, but one of the things is that mushrooms need to be packaged, plastic packaging. There's that mushrooms need to breathe. They need to be, oh, a sort of a paper bag is great to store them in. A couple of the sort of a couple of days in plastic, and they're just a mushroom is almost a live product once we've harvested, and they just go really, really, really bad. And even if they don't go bad, they stay good. The weird thing is that uh, a lot of people don't know you can grow mushrooms from another mushroom. That's what I mean by a mushroom is sort of still alive. You can cut off a little bit of a mushroom, and then everything goes right and the conditions are right. You can grow infinitively more mushrooms. The only problem is here. So you've locked it in plastic, and because mushrooms and mold are from the same family, there's no, well, genus. There's lots of different types, but mushroom, if it feels like, oh, you've given me the right conditions to grow, so closed, high humidity, just a tad bit of airflow, and then what they're going to do is grow mycelium. They're going to try shoot their root system, and the root system can come out of anywhere. So you'll end up thinking, oh, my product is molded, even though I bought it yesterday, but it's just the mycelium trying, it's the mushroom being kept badly that's just trying to regrow. So mushrooms, I would say, are one of the ones that get, unfortunately, thrown away just because of bad handling and nothing else. Again, I would still say if you see like a mold-looking substance from a mushroom, don't just say it's mycelium. Still be very careful because it might be uh, another fungus, a bad mold, and that's obviously not good. But for example, citrus peel is a massive one. Like the amount of every if people juice we're still in like the end of citrus season in Malta. So citrus peel can always be turned into something, be it a syrup, a jam, a marmalade. It can be kept stored in sugar, just literally chopped up and covered with sugar and kept for candied peel, for especially Christmas. It will keep in your fridge for ages. Um, things, those I would say citrus peel and those are huge. Um, Peels of vegetables that don't need to be thrown away. So, for example, the skins of peas. I just went for I did a project for a restaurant where all the pea skins that they have, all the pea shells, I changed into like this really nice tasting vinegar. Just fermented them into a vinegar. But I mean, they can be boiled and turned into a broth. They can be, well, I mean, carrot peels as well, onion peels, things like that can all be turned into the base of a broth. You're still going to need to throw the skins and everything away, but at least you've gotten a second life, a second product out of them. And there's really, really no need to throw them away. Potato skins can just be eaten, for example. A lot of people throw away potato skins, but in reality, they can just be kept on. It's full of fiber. And animal bones for those animal eaters out there, pescatarians and things. That's sort of they can always again be used and turned into a broth. And if you're a gardening enthusiast, same with eggshells, they all have place like good calcium for the soil. And stale bread is one of the worst, just the worst. Stale bread, croissants, any baked goods, those get thrown away really, really quickly. If it's a whole loaf, you can just dampen it and put it back in the oven for a couple of minutes, and it's perfectly fine. They can be sliced and frozen. That prevents a lot of wastage. quite a few things. Of like I have a habit of keeping any stale bread, freezing it, and then when I have a good amount, I'll just bake a big batch of bread, traditional Maltese pudina, so bread and chocolate pudding, and just share it amongst the family once it's done. And yeah, things like that. It's nothing really needs to go to waste. I also make like if I'm at home and I have lots of my brother is a sourdough baker, um, has like a bakery as well, so he tends to get me some stale bread at home. And so we have made like my own misos, I've made my own shoyus and things like that, a replacement to soy sauce, but using stale bread. So you can do a lot of things.
Wow. Wow. And with your work with restaurants, I mean, there's so many good ideas you were just talking about. Are there specific ways that you think restaurants could do better to reduce their waste? I know, for example, when I used to work in New York, there was a school we worked with that tried to notice what didn't go, what people didn't choose. So they bought less of it, they're just like preemptive measures, things like that.
Yeah, that's one thing that could always be done if you're noticing your plates are coming back slightly full and nobody's taking the takeaway. Maybe just reduce portion size a bit. That's like you're saying, one of the bare bones basic things to do. Honestly, I think that is, yeah, just look at where you have certain problems and find the easiest solution. There's storage. I find that poor storage is the killer of these sort of things, be it at a restaurant, be it at home, things like that. Even for example, berries, there are proper ways where you could kill the external bacteria and keep a berry without changing its flavor longer, like keep its shelf life longer for another week at least. Unfortunately, it's not always the restaurant's fault. So, for example, like I said, with the mushrooms being covered, I think there's a lot of laws by the sanitation department in the restaurant that a lot of products have to be covered. And that's good to a certain respect because, especially with cooked and raw foods that are high risk, I think that's very, very important. But at the same time, it causes low risk ingredients to go bad lot quicker. For example, let's take an example. It's great with cucumbers that sometimes, again, I think there are better solutions to plastic, but you see cucumbers that are individually wrapped in plastic, and that's okay. That prevents them from going bad quickly. But for example, actually, a lot of people don't know this, but putting tomatoes in the fridge actually causes them to go bad quicker. Tomatoes are meant to be kept outside. They're not meant to be kept in a fridge. You keep them in a fridge, they're going to go bad quicker, a lot quicker. So little things like that. Onions as well. So alliums don't need to be kept in the fridge, but if you're going to cover them up, they're going to go bad even quicker. Same with potatoes, things like that. I would say for restaurants, for hotels and things like that, is just taking notice of what, because usually these things come out in a pattern. There's always a pattern, these things. So looking at those patterns, figuring out, listen, I'm having a problem with this, and how do you solve that problem? That's basically like trying to find out, like realizing that is a problem and then trying to sort it out. But I think it's take the time to realize what the problems are.
Yes, exactly. I even had heard of in the States some companies making machines that measure the waste. So you can actually keep track of, if we're wasting this many carrots every week, then you buy less, things
Yeah.
like that. So some solutions. And I was wondering if you know of any shining examples of restaurants here in Malta that are making the effort not to waste, because I've heard of a couple that are really trying.
In fact, I work for one of them, which is Ion by Simon Rogan. We're trying leaps and bounds to actually reduce waste drastically. So we've done again mushroom trimmings turned into shoyu instead of buying soy sauce from abroad. We're turning mushroom waste into shoyu, and we actually compost a little bit with Friends of the Earth as well. So we honestly we've turned citrus fruit peels into marmalades, into breakfast jams. We've turned honestly very few things go to worse. We ferment everything into vinegars. I have a background in preservation, the science of preservation. So luckily as well, I will like find economical solutions. Like when I say economical, energy. economy, like not wasting energy, not putting in too much energy to turn something into something, because then it defeats the purpose of wastage. If you're producing more energy than you get out of product just for fun. So yeah, a lot of things like that. Also, not in Malta but abroad, I think there's the whole Humble group, so Simon Rogan's restaurant in the UK as well. Massive everything that they do, from composting to taking the gas to heating up greenhouses using that gas. And there's also another restaurant I admire highly in the UK called Silo. They've just, for example, they use onion peels to turn it into paper, and they write their menus on that. Same as we do at Ion, for example. The menus are written on doctor scrubs, on leftover doctor scrubs. Uh, so it's something
Very
small like
unique.
that. But there are others as well. There's, for example, LGV, who are really looking at reducing their waste. Noni restaurant in Valletta as well is doing some cool waste management things. Harbor Club as well, coincidentally in Valletta. So there are quite a few restaurants in Malta which are opting there. And for example, Ramla Bay and Melliha have actually an eco certification. They've got some eco certification as well. I used to work with them in the past, and I know that they care about the environment greatly. So there are quite a few places that are actually trying to up their game and change things around.
It's really great. Yeah, and we appreciate we get the scraps from the Ion restaurant and compost them at our office, which is really cool.
Feed the worms.
um, yes, we feed the worms. So, is there a difference in food waste on an international versus a local level?
I think so, but in a really good way. So on a local level, I think we reduce a little bit less. We're really lucky in Malta that we're not forced with these really strong laws that there are, that like, oh, this is grade A, grade B, grade C, and grade B and grade C don't get sold. So like, just because something looks a bit misshapen or the size is a bit smaller, as long as the product is healthy and presentable and doesn't have any damage and can sell, it's allowed to be sold, which I think is great. Broad, most of the food waste, I believe 17% of total food waste is just attributed to fruit and vegetable that get C grade or below, which is just ridiculous. When you keep in mind that our food chain is 33% of our total global emissions. So yes, I think that one small thing helps us sort of stay at the top of things. I do think in Malta, maybe we don't have enough free time to be able to help reduce waste at home. But other than that, I think we are a little bit better than certain other Western countries.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to see in Malta that we have the pickup at the door of food scraps to make it convenient for people. And while we're talking about residences, we should mention quickly any tips you might have for people to waste less at home. We always encourage people to compost at home if they want to, but at least we have the bags. But in terms of reducing waste, if you have suggestions.
But I would say my first suggestion is always, always, always keep your oldest product. I like to work, every restaurant works in a system first in, first out. First thing you buy should be the first thing you eat. Don't buy something new, eat that, and then have something there. So always have your oldest products on the eye level section in the fridge. Always. I that's sort of what, once you walk into the fridge, you're hungry, you want to nibble on something, just open the fridge. And the first thing you're going to see, regardless if it's new or old, that's the first thing that's going to catch your eye. So I like to say, just move your oldest stuff to the sort of closest place to your eyes in the fridge. That means you're going to get to that first, be it the top or the bottom. Lock away your oldest stuff, keep it at the back of the fridge or keep it in the vegetable cupboard at the bottom. That's your newest stuff. Always lock that away. But most importantly, and really, really easy, I do it every day. Just take 2 minutes to look in your fridge. Just honestly, just take 2 minutes, have a good look. Just say, like, I clean out my freezer once a week. Just I look at my freezer and go, okay, I've had this here for a little bit of a long time. It's not I've had it hidden in the freezer, and that happens to a lot of people where it's hidden away for 2 3 years. Then you're like, oh, I don't know how long it's been. Let me just chuck it out. No, just find 10 minutes in the weekend for your freezer and 2 minutes a day just to go through the fridge and go, oh, how long does my milk have to expire? When did I open this can of tomato sauce? Little things like that, and they make the world of difference. You'd be saving money and throwing away less fundamentally.
Yes, helps save money too, which I think is
Yeah,
important as
I
well.
always like to say that. I don't like to say throwing away food. It's throwing away your money.
Yep.
Throwing away farmers, a food producer, a restaurant's time, effort.
Yep.
It's quite offensive in a way to a chef, to a food producer, that or to a farmer or a fisherman.
Yes.
You're wasting their time.
Yes.
And wasting your money.
Yep. The nutrients. Yep. Exactly.
Yep.
So
Everything.
we only have time for one more question, but I would love to know if you have ideas about what could the government do to support these efforts being made by businesses and individuals, at any level, national or local? What do you think?
I think, we'll talk about locally. I think one, there can be initiatives, and there could be monetary compensation for things. By what I mean, like little competitions, which they already do, maybe of a monetary prize, maybe just a commercial prize where they get a little stamp from the government going like, oh, this year, this restaurant or this food establishment has only thrown away 100 kilos. That. But most importantly, and this is something I'd really love to see in my lifetime, and I think needs to be done. I really do think that there needs to be a law now, like yesterday, about garbage collection. I think the government needs to step up. So if you're a private enterprise, if you're a supermarket, restaurant, and all restaurants I've heard would love this as well, there needs to be incentives for garbage collectors to separate the waste. At home, it's great. We put out our compost, it's going to the compost. We're putting out our recycling, it's going to get recycled. Restaurants, unfortunately, they're doing that. They're separating their waste. But because they have to have a private contractor, the private contractor comes and grabs everything, throws it in one truck, and dumps it all in the same pile. And I think that's where the government really needs to step in, take charge, and go, listen, again, not to the restaurants, not to the garbage collectors, going, listen, you need to now, at the same price, separate the waste. What you're doing is not good. It needs to be separated. I think that's like a really big thing. I think there needs to be also maybe more creative solutions as well. We have a lot of academics, but unfortunately, academia isn't always the great at free thinking. And I think creative thinkers are where you start seeing food really not only food, everything really, really, really getting reduced. Again, you need a good balance of both. But I think there needs to be a few people going, oh, you know what? In the past, we had philosophers. We had these people sort of sitting down, and their job was to think about the world, about whatever. And I think it's really good we've come leaps and bounds with academics, but I also think that free thinking aspects or the creative thinkers, there aren't that many of them as well. So I think just having a little bit of a cheerful nature, a little bit more practical experience, a little bit more creativity can really help this as well. Because one man's trash is another man's treasure is a really, really, really true statement. I mean, and if you have somebody that's been digging through trash to create treasure out of it, I think that's better than someone that's been having treasure and just keeping it. If that makes sense. Makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. So very interesting ideas for policy. And it's, maybe something we can advocate for through Friends of the Earth. And hopefully we have some government officials listening to this podcast to these ideas. So I want to say thank you very much for being on this show. It's been very eye-opening. I learned a lot I got some good ideas, and I learned that peppers can get sunburn, which I didn't know. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We have been speaking with Keith Abela, a trained chef, lecturer, food science writer, and gastronomy consultant working here in Malta. Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your experience and expertise. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Friends of the Earth Malta podcast, where we discuss sustainability topics of importance to the Maltese Islands and beyond. Many thanks to our guests for sharing their expertise, and to the team here at Friends of the Earth Malta, who helped to make it happen. Also, thank you to Burn, the musicians who provided our podcast music, who use music to talk about issues including the climate emergency and social justice while instilling hope for the future. See their solar-powered website at burnofficial.com. You can learn more about Friends of the Earth Malta's work on our website, fomalta.org, and by following us on our Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn pages. And please be sure to sign up for our monthly newsletter, where you can keep up with all of our ongoing events and activities. We'd love to hear your feedback. See you next time!